All righty. Well, thank you all for joining us. My name is Timantha Norman. I'm the executive director, well, not director, executive editor for the Tulsa Star and former educator myself in the Tulsa area. And I want to thank you all for joining this very important conversation around inequity and the pandemic in local education. I want to take some time to quickly introduce my fellow panelists. First, I have longtime community advocate, activist, and education advocate, Darryl Bright. He also leads up a very passionate group of education advocates called Citizens for a Better Educational System here in Tulsa. And then I have Chara Patterson-Harding, and she is a parent and an educator and an education advocate in the Oklahoma City area. So I want to thank them for being here, and I look forward to a very engaging conversation for sure. So, kind of where I wanted to start this was, speaking to people's urgency and need to want to get back to normalcy, so to speak, in this pandemic, and me just being kind of fascinated by why folks are wanting to get back to normalcy when I feel as though normalcy for a lot of different folks, a lot of different groups, especially when you talk about Black folks, Indigenous folks, just all of the groups of folks that have we're not doing too well, pre-pandemic. So it's just like, why are we rushing back to get back to those same conditions? And when we think about education, we think about students that are special education students or just students that are in, poor families, working poor families, and how the education system was pretty inequitable beforehand. I just kind of wanted to get you guys' perspectives from the Oklahoma City lens and the Tulsa lens on some of the historical background and things that weren't quite right, with educational systems in both cities before the pandemic even happened, to kind of reiterate to folks why, the rush to return to normalcy as it was is maybe not the best, course of action. So either one of you can go first.
Well, I'll go for sure. I tell you what, we don't want to go back to normalcy, or normalcy, whatever we want to call it. It wasn't what we would call meeting our needs as African Americans, our children. We had a system and have a system that is predicated upon a white middle class values and lifestyle. And so the instructional theory or pedagogy is reflective of that. But it stems further back than that here in Tulsa and for us as African Americans in this country, when the country was saying, that is, the leaders of this country were saying that we had a Negro problem after the Civil War, and that problem was how could they make us more accommodate their needs and not necessarily our growth and development. I won't bother to go back too far on that, but there are a lot of areas of thought, sociology in this country was predicated on trying to define who we were and to prove that we were lazy, so-called lazy, didn't want to work, liked to drink, loved to dance, all those kind of stereotypes that we know. But then when it went into this area of eugenics, nothing you can do for those Negroes because that's in their DNA. And as we look at how education, even back at that point, came to be, was predicated on us accommodating white folks. And it was, because they wanted schools and they were giving their money to schools and philanthropists giving their money to schools because those schools were teaching us social science. And I read about that, and I said, social science, well, what does that mean? Well, they meant the graces that you needed to accommodate white folks, how you spoke, how you walked, how you talked, never looking in the eye. And it is very deep-seated that in all the amendments that were added to the Constitution, how they were always meant the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, etc., they were all derailed. They were all derailed. And it was in the battle to keep us in our place,
Mm-hmm.
obviously was terror from the Klan and from others, and lynching, etc. Looking at, and I won't get too, we don't have a lot of time to get too deep into that, but if you understand what I'm saying, we went through a lot of epics in which we proved to ourselves and to the world that our legacy is predicated upon struggle, battle. That's who we are. And we had to do not just show white folks, no, ourselves, because we deserve it, because we have blood, tears in this system. But it was
Yeah,
always trying to be taken away. So as we look today, it's still with us. It is still with us
for
in
sure.
terms of how we are being miseducated, because the theories that they have, or instructional theory of teaching, it never addresses our cultural heritage. It never addresses our intellectual heritage. It never addresses our cognitive development, our linguistic development, our self-identification, our learning styles, etc.
For sure.
And those things have been missing on infinitum. And there's a reason. It's all about power and control. And racism is at the very uh, bottom of that, as a root cause. Structural racism,
Mm-hmm.
uh, as we see it today, that's baked into our educational systems. Because as we look at McLean, just for instance, a high school,
Mm-hmm.
we're working on our 19th principal there in 33 years. Every fall, we have ninth graders knocking on the front door and say, hey, we're here. And many of them, not all of them, please, I don't want to paint this with too broad a strokes, have come not prepared for high school. And this has been going on longer than the principal and the teachers have been alive. It's been generations, and we got the documents to show that. And as we look today, our needs, academic and developmental needs and growth needs, are not being addressed. And that's by design.
Yeah,
And you say, well, what design? Well, it's all about power and control and also exploitation.
for sure. All right. Well, I want to let Chara, what are your thoughts on that from the Oklahoma City lens?
So I have the privilege of working in the oldest institution for that was designed to educate African Americans, and so my perspective is very similar. However, I Oklahoma City education was never designed for Black people in general. So in order to keep someone ignorant, you don't teach them to read. And so when education became a privilege that was available to us, it was never equitable to the white peers. And so that trend just never, there was a time in American history where they would draw the fingerprints and students would be bused from one school to another to make sure that integration was a thing. But slowly after the Supreme Court decided that that was unconstitutional to send a person to school based on their race alone, um, then that those plans were no longer, they were null and void, and so you go back to de facto segregation. And unfortunately, when you have a group of students who are underprivileged and they don't have the same exposure as their white counterparts, then they don't have the things that are equal and equitable to students in suburban areas whose parents can afford to provide them with opportunities outside of school. And so the systemic racism that has been a part of, that has affected education, comes down to where our students live. the grocery stores that they have available, the resources that are available in those areas, and all of those things contribute to the whole health of a student. And so when you have people coming into a school that are broken, not just from a poor educational system, but they're focused on their needs, then it's just hard, or it's hard for them to be at the same starting place as their peers in the same age group.
For sure. And I think you both bring us really great points. So I think you both, in different ways, touched on like the need of education, not to just try to see students as like, you know, human capital, as it were. You know, you have school systems that have departments called that, which always rub me the wrong way. It's like, I know what capital is, but it's like it's weird to put human beings next to capital. I won't go there, but it's just been in recent years I've seen this push to like see students as whole human beings and try to be more supportive of trying to take care of or try to facilitate taking care of needs or having teachers that are culturally competent and all of that. But I definitely see where school systems have fallen short. Are there things that you've seen happening with TPS and OKCPS respectively that you feel as though they're trying on the surface, but you feel as though, I'm saying now educating the whole student, do you feel as though they're coming up short or, yeah?
It is very difficult to begin to psychoanalyze folks. So, like my grandmama said, words don't care who say them. The actions come from either ignorance, right? You're really truly trying to change something, or it's coming from another agenda in terms of control and power, and understand what the role of education has played historically in it, and you going down that same path. Sorry.
Go ahead.
And what I was saying was that over the years, we have seen many efforts that were supposed to have taken us out of this. But when you look at 1954 to 2013, we have a chronology of the programs that were here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You rarely see anything about African Americans. The only time you see it is when they were talking about the demographics of the school and the programs, etc. Even when they can look at their own outcomes and they see that we, at the bottom of every academic achievement measure, they took no action. They ignored, by design, those individuals who confronted and spoke truth to power and continue today. And as they move through those generations, we have enough documentation that they can't argue that they never had our interests at heart. Now, the schools that we're in reflect the political and economic and social cultural conditions outside of that school. And then we have to ask, well, to the point that the sister had raised about some things that are happening outside of school, we have to look at this holistically. And neither one has been done outside or inside. We're still struggling with inequities. We're still struggling with discrimination. We're still looking at being made fodder for the pipeline to prison. And we look at what kind of jobs do we have? And what are we prepared to do in this world in the 21st century? They're not preparing our children, even by their own outcomes. But there have been some battles with the system, and maybe we can talk about that a little later, but it is baked into this system. You could be African American sitting at the head of this, and if you follow the same policies in this structural racism, based on structural racism, you'll get the same results.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to agree. So in our communities, because of, especially after, I'm not going to say failed integration attempts, but especially in Oklahoma City, after the finger plan was dissolved. So basically, they had a plan where you were bused from one side of town to another. Then you have these homogeneous groups of students. So, and not just racially homogeneous, but you also have like poor, and so people who have enough money to leave from the city schools, they do. And so what you end up having left over is you have people who are really passionate and believe in public education, and they send their kids to these public schools with hope and and are really involved in the school and what's going on and hope to bring about change. But the majority of the people that you have left, especially in the community that I serve, you have a lot of people who they don't have a choice to be anyplace else.
Mm-hmm.
And so because they don't have a choice, they're dealing with a lot of other things that they bring with them. And our district has made an attempt to understand and recognize the socio-emotional component to education. However, it's something that doesn't happen overnight. And it's also something that requires continuity. And so, I've been in education for 10 years, and I think I've lost count of the number of superintendents that I've worked that have been the head of my district. So I think I've had at least 4. And so when you have that much change in leadership, there's constant change. And so when there's no direction at the top, or when there's not continuity at the top, it's reflective in what goes on in the school. And so that amount of change is hard to implement anything and to meet anybody's needs when, there's a constant change and constant change within buildings. It's really difficult, but I can say that the trend has been trending back towards understanding that students need they're more than just we come to school and I'm going to learn, and there are other things that come with them in educating the whole child.
For sure, for sure. So I kind of switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about what's been going on since the pandemic hit, especially last semester, spring, seeing how, I mostly saw how TPS responded to it with, transitioning after spring break to have the online classes. I believe probably Oklahoma City public schools did the same thing. And kind of just, can you all just speak to, I guess, how we think maybe the structural racism, also structural classism as well, when you talk about some of these things, how do you think that's still playing out as far as like, in my view, maybe you guys have a different view, but the lack of urgency, because I still see that TPS hasn't made a final decision on whether they're going to push the in-person classes. I know they mentioned this virtual academy or whatnot, but we still don't know what that's going to look like per se. That hasn't, the details is all still very vague. And I think I've heard a day or two ago that Oklahoma City is going to start later and do first 9 weeks online, which then it's like, well, are all students going to be able to do that? If you have working families, how's that going to work? Students that are on IEPs, things like that. So can you kind of speak to your thoughts on that?
Because I think mine is easier. So I'm going to start. Oklahoma City. Last week, I was really scared as a parent, because I said my family is Team C.U.B.E.S, because me and my husband are both public educators, and then my sister-in-law is going to enter into education, and my mother-in-law is she's a librarian. So we're in education, and so I believe in Oklahoma City. And I was very nervous with the first plan that they released a few weeks ago. But this current plan of understanding that the Black and Brown communities are the most impacted from COVID-19 made me feel so much better about our board and our superintendent and our deputy superintendent in making sure that they thought about the health and safety of our students first, and understanding that we could not go into school the same way that we had. And I also feel like it took a lot for them to be able to openly admit that they need more time in order to continue to plan, in order to be prepared to meet our student needs. And in our board meeting, they did say like there are a lot of things that they don't have the answers to right now, but they do know that these are things that they need to be able to address, and that they need more time to be able to address them, especially our students who have special needs and our early childhood students. Our kids have a lot, like being completely disconnected from school is completely detrimental to their development in many ways than one, mainly because school really is a safe place for them. And so we have taken a safe place for many of our students. And they recognize that. And they also understand that they don't necessarily, like they know that this is not good for all of their families, but they had to make the decision based on what was better for the health of our communities. And it was very scary. And who knows? And it's really scary to going into the unknown, especially with younger kids and people who are focused on survival. But hopefully things will be better.
Darryl, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think we're ready. I think when you look at this pandemic, this is not a common cold. It's translated into death. There's no therapeutics, a cure. There's no vaccination. We just saw last week in Missouri a camp open up for, I think, fifth graders through about eighth grade, and they were ready. They had two that had been infected. 2 days later, they had 42. And a couple of days after that, there were 82 of those folks, maybe a little longer, those young folks, they were infected. Had to shut it down. I wish I had more information about how they proceeded. I've seen the same thing when issues with Israel, who thought they had flatlined. And weeks later, children started to contract the disease. The teachers started to contract the disease, and also the community outside. So they're right back to where they were. Mm-hmm. When you look at the mindset that has created this, and we will not get into Trump's, but when you look at the mindset, when you look at a problem, when you look at what is facing you, if you have not done that in the past, you cannot do it under these conditions.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, you hear from the district, well, we need to talk to the parents, and the parents need to do this, and they need to do that, etc. Well, let me tell you something. When the parents are coming to you about the conditions in their schools, you told them, I know what I need to do. I don't need to talk to you. There was no bridge built. There was contempt. There was arrogance. There was racist kind of kicking to the curb. So now, when you say, well, we need parents to do X, Y, and Z, are they going to listen to you? We just had a meeting last week, and my iPhone rather, it lit up like a musical instrument from the people that were inside that particular virtual meeting. I've heard this before. There's not enough details. I'm scared. And they held another one last Thursday, and I got the same thing. So when we look at this and we see that the truth has not been told to or shared with the public in terms of what this virus can do to you and what kind of individuals that are susceptible. I had never heard that those of us, I should know because your immune system is compromised. You know, when you have folks that are there with asthma, young children, when you have those who are have type 2 diabetes, sickle cell, serious heart conditions, obesity, other immune systems, things that have weakened their systems, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and chronic kidney disease, and on and on and on. And even if you're cured, you could have kidney problems, damage to your blood vessels, dementia. There are a lot of things that happen, and I don't think this comes off the Center for Disease Control, but I haven't heard a lot of this. It makes you take pause, because even if you come out okay, you may not be okay. There are some issues there about how you look at a circumstance and you make a risk assessment. They don't know how to do that. How do I know? Because I've done those. They're very shallow. They really default to individuals who really don't have the skill sets. And it makes me, just like they do anything else. You want to get through, buy it off the shelf, cookie cutter, be more efficient and effective. But the main thing is what this disease can do to you and to our children. They may bounce back quicker, but they can be a carrier. So there's the in-person component of this, but I have not seen anything in hard copy yet that tells me what are the protocols that you have in place. And I've got 30 of them that I came up with. What truly are you talking about doing when those kiddos go up and down the hall? Have you talked about screening? How do you do that? Have you talked about testing? How do you do that? And you talk about, well, those are the things we'll be developing soon. Soon? August is here.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about educating parents and educating, I should say, parents to what they're going into, and you've got other individuals that are a part of that who are in that building, they need to be crystal clear on the protocols. This is not a common cold.
Yeah.
You can't take shortcuts. So you have to have protocols in place. But you cannot give me those protocols the first day of school. You've got to show them to me. I haven't seen any as such.
For sure. Yeah. No, yep.
So what I'm saying is the lack of preparation that I see for this is the same lack of preparation I see during the school year. Same mindset, same paradigm about how to make an analysis and really being inclusive when you should have been inclusive for the many, many generations that we've been asked, and our community has been asked and demanding our input. So now you want the input, but you haven't built a relationship with the parents. So as we see all these issues come up, I don't hear anyone talking about in school, and you've got to, quarantine? You got to do a trace back. If I've got 5 people staying in my apartment, and I've got a quarantine, you tell me where I quarantine in a 3-room apartment, or maybe smaller, or maybe a little larger. And you know what? I'm not going to tell you I'm sick, because I cannot quarantine for 14 days. I cannot have that kind of gap in my paycheck. And besides that, my boss may not hire me or call me back. Okay? Even if I said, yes, let's go, I may or may not, if I'm unemployed, I don't have any medical insurance. Who's going to pay for this? Who's going to feed? Who's going to feed my family, my children? Well, we hadn't thought about that. Well, you must, because everything that we've seen, these inequities that have been with us for generations upon generations, come bubbling to the top in a pandemic or depression, and people get ground to dust, never recover, physically, mentally, financially, and I couldn't tell you, with the evictions, they're talking about evictions here. State of Oklahoma is second in the nation in terms of evictions. Tulsa, Oklahoma is, I think, 11th in the nation. Do you realize how many evictions are going to go down? Well, yes, they've got this federal program, and they've got a few individual organizations that are nonprofit, but they won't last forever. So now I'm homeless. Oh, and while we're talking about it, how does this program, or excuse me, the in-person and the virtual, how are you going to deal with these homeless people? Well, what? And how many, because of the evictions, are going to end up in that group of individuals who you've ignored, didn't see them as people?
Mm-hmm.
That is a human carnage. And the tidal wave isn't over yet. Of the unemployment, of the death, of the debilitation, evictions, permanent unemployment, more so than we saw in the past. So as we look at all that and we talk about all those questions, I would not put my child in the school based upon what I know about the history of this district. And I have not heard a full-throated explanation of how they're going to take care of health and safety. We get more talk about flexibility in the school year, like at the last board meeting, and the administrative, operational, and structural things, but not truly focusing in on health and safety. Without that, it's no deal. Is this a trick question? My life, my baby's life, or coming to this building. Now, the other option we have is what? Virtual. But even at that, we've been talking 25 years about the digital divide. Now we get here, and all of a sudden you're going to have virtual, and really hasn't done due diligence to ensure that our children have what they need in terms of even an internet connection. Some places in Tulsa, you can't even get the internet connection.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, that brings up a good point. I've been thinking about, like, we talk about structural racism in the educational system, and that is a very real thing, but also classism, how that comes into play. And Chara, I definitely, from your perspective, I wanted to hear more about, do you think, how does classism currently come into play in the way that the district does education, and especially right now, especially talking about the different plans and the whole going online for the first 9 weeks. And like Darryl said, do they have a succinct rollout plan to making sure that, like, housing insecure families are able to do that, or families that, English is a second language, they are able to still get the instruction they need, and with parents who maybe, a lot of times I've seen with some, kids from certain Latinx families, they have a lot of adult responsibilities, and they're the ones who knows about technology, and their parents don't always know about technology as much. So it's just like those nuances of those kinds of things. What role do you think classism plays in, like, the very delayed response to this pandemic?
Well, I think.
Oh, let me get Chara, and then.
Okay, go ahead.
So the technology, the inequities, or the clear division between the haves and the have-nots in technology is going to put our district behind everyone else. Clearly, because in the city metro area, there are at least 2 or 3 other school districts, the larger school districts, who had already begun the one-to-one process with their students, and so their teachers were already familiar. I'm sorry, we're on vacation, so you can hear my little people.
That's okay.
So they were already in a position where their teachers were comfortable. They already learned the things that as educators we're going to learn this upcoming school year. And so that puts our students at a disadvantage simply because we're going to be at the developing stages and the emerging stages in being able to create effective learning tools for our students. Whereas in other places and in other districts where this isn't an issue, their teachers are already acclimated to using the technology and delivering lessons and posting content, and students are used to working through content. So they're not using all of their energy learning a process. They're actually going to be able to engage in learning content versus learning the processes. And in Oklahoma City, unfortunately, I'm going to spend 4 weeks teaching my students how to be able to go to school online. And in the next 4 weeks that we report back from July 27th through the 31st, I'm going to be focusing on how to deliver instruction. And even though I'm going to have a crash course on it, my effectiveness isn't going to be, I'm not going to be as effective as I could be. Am I going to be okay? Absolutely. But then there are people who are 10 and 15 years older than I am. I take that back. 30 years older than I am, and they have a hard time posting their grades in their grade book, let alone I'm going to teach you, I want to teach you history or math virtually. I don't even, some of my coworkers have flip phones. So then I'm going to ask them to, go from your flip phone, that everyday connection, to being able to deliver instruction in a new and innovative way. And so when you serve people who in this the we I think all of our schools have free lunch. So who are poor, they're at the disadvantage. And so it's going to be really important that, like, it takes a team in order to be able to meet our kids' needs. And I know, and I don't know because I didn't listen, but they talked about restructuring some of the positions in our schools so that our ESL kids and our ELL kids are able to have the resources that they need in order to be able to um, function online and get those services. And I do know that Oklahoma City, like in their board meeting, they explicitly said that after the state board meeting on Thursday, they would be able to be, once those parameters are set and whatever is going before the state board on Thursday will determine the path that they take in regards to our special education students, our ELL students, and like I said, our pre-K and I think maybe kindergarten kids. But I do know at our district they are being at this point they're being very transparent with the fact that we have a lot of working pieces and there are a lot of things that are unknown and there's a lot of things that aren't fair to our kids, but it's the new reality. And it is better for them for it to be kind of unfair and for them to be alive and us not putting them at an unnecessary health risk than for them to be in our schools and we're having funerals for our kids or their teachers for that matter, because we put their health and safety at risk.
For sure. And I love the way that you put that, Chara, the new reality, instead of us trying to get back to the normals, like this is a new reality. And
But
sorry about that. Yeah, the new reality. Darryl, I'll let you chime in, and I wanted to ask one final wrap up question. But go ahead.
Okay. Everyone who's in the Tulsa Public School area, please look at the special board meeting. It'll be live streamed Monday. This is when all the pieces are supposed to be put together. First, health and safety, and those who are accountable for it. Listen for the protocols to ensure that. You have your own lifestyle. You will not be able to talk at this meeting, by the way. It's a special meeting. But you can, contact a board member, or you can contact the administration there, and you can, if they could, get a hold of you. I can help if you can share my contact information. But there are certain determinants that you must say, well, I'm going to trust my child to this in-person learning, or I'm not. I'm going to send them to the virtual, or her to the virtual school. Well, that too has its own challenges, particularly if you're working and you're working 3 to 11 or 11 to 7 in the morning. Although those particular courses will be available, they say 24 hours. That means you have to come home from work or whenever during the day, and you've got to also be a teacher. Because the person that you may be leaving them with may not have the capacity, not saying that they won't love your children and won't take care of them, to help those children, particularly if you got multiple grades in your house, third, fifth, and somebody in high school. It's a challenge. It really is. Look and listen, please, to what they have to say, what they're saying and what they're not saying. Because if you have an IEP child, that is an individual education program for your child, how is that going to be served? If you have a child that is ELL, English language learning, how are they going to do that? If you have a child that's been retained because of the Reading Sufficiency Act in the 3rd grade, what is going to become of that child? Because they just pushed them into the next grade level for this coming year. So look at your circumstance and formulate the kinds of questions that protect your children, but also the challenges that you may be up against because of you not wanting them to go to school in person and being in that virtual school. And just by the way, I have not had, on request, not one iota of a word or a sheet of paper that explains that Tulsa Virtual Academy. Maybe it's coming Monday, but man, that's late in the game. But I'll be watching. You need to watch. And please, we've got to look out for our own children, and we have to make sure that they are being treated and taught to our expectations. But I doubt that they have talked to any of the parents that have these special circumstances, because they have to have life-sustaining jobs, and they must go to those jobs. And there are other issues that deal with their health and well-being, and we have to look out for that. But please stay tuned. That'll be, I believe, 5 o'clock Monday, and it's live stream. You go to the website, and it will direct you live stream to a Zoom meeting. We'll be talking about these very issues.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you saying that. That actually was kind of tying back into my my final question was going to be, I was going to have you guys some time to kind of give some folks some actionable next steps. Obviously these folks are on the school board and our superintendents, they work for us, in our family. So I want people to feel empowered to know that they can reach out to these folks, put pressure on them, let them know their thoughts, that they're not happy with the lack of urgency around this post-pandemic educational planning. And Chara, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think are some great next steps that concerned families and parents and teachers can take to voice their concerns?
Definitely contacting your board representative, but also looking at the things that are available to you in your community, and really being a part of being a part of encouraging community and reaching out to resources that may not have been there, being a creator of a resource, using your village, because school is going to be a lot different this year because it has to be. And the only way that this is going to be successful is if everyone works together as the community and emphasizing the need. Like it can't be, we have to stay so far away from each other, but we have to be connected to make sure that we're making that all of our needs are met because there's no way if I work from 11 to 7 or 7 to 11, whatever your work schedule is, it's hard for everyone. I have 2 kids that are school age, and I'm going to be working teaching other people's school or teaching other people's children. And I'm not a pre-K teacher. I don't know how to teach little people how to write. I mean, I'm sure I could figure it out, but I do understand that it's going to take more than just me to make sure that my son's needs are met. And I can't just go back to like, well, you gotta learn that at school. I know that I have to figure out, I'm gonna have to make some things that don't make sense in my scheme right now. And I'm gonna have to make them make sense. And I'm also gonna have to be willing and ready for the changes that are going to come about. And I have to use the people that are around me and, just that sense of community and rely on my community a lot. I keep saying community, but because school is not going, like, I can't just drop him off anymore for 8 hours and know that he's going to be okay. I'm going to have to, like I said, use my resources and figure out what they are and ask what those resources are and look for stuff. Like really ask for your resources. Ask for resources because those are going to be the key to making this divide or this transition easier because it's not going to be just the school, it's also going to be outside communities or outside agencies that help make this successful. So looking for those things that will assist in making these things more smooth.
I think that is spot on. And we have some individuals that really, I don't think, get enough credit that have fed our community, and our hats off to them, and who have done due diligence as far as their resources, um, and they have done due diligence in terms of making sure that they have fed our families where they otherwise would have been left hungry and maybe worse. I don't know. But I think, the agencies, the churches, um, and I know there are some recreational centers and some community centers that you need to call in your area here in Tulsa. You have the North Navy Center, Boys and Girls Club, 31st Street, and Martin Luther King. You've got the Hutchinson YMCA. You've got the Dream Center on 46th Street. And I know I'm leaving some folks out, but please, I just want to look around, ask around, talk to your ministers, um, contact anyone that may be in your church or in your neighborhood. But yes, I agree. You must reach out because we want you to have as much as you can that is life sustaining and make sure that you get it. But I think some resources will be attached to whatever the district comes out with in terms of who you can call for help. Please look for that. Please ask for it. And it may be I think some of that is on the website under COVID-19. And that is the TPS, Tulsa Public Schools website. And call 211, do the help. And look at the Salvation Army and on and on and on. Please do what you need to do in this new reality.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I said that was a good way to end it. Him circling back around to the new reality. I'm really just talking to myself. But thank you guys. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Thank you, Miss Patterson-Harding. I really appreciate you all doing this. And yeah, it's just wish everybody luck in this new era. Community is very important. Mutual aid very important, and holding our elected officials accountable to outcomes for our children's futures is very important. So I want to thank you all. Thank you for joining us, and everybody have a nice evening.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Take care.